The cold winds howled across the northern plains as Tormund Giantsbane stood at the edge of the wall, his red beard frosted with snow, his eyes fixed on the land beyond. The war was long over. The White Walkers were defeated. Jon Snow had disappeared. Into the north, and peace, an unfamiliar word, had spread across Westeros. But peace never lasted long in a land soaked in blood and power. King Bran the Broken, once the boy who fell from a tower, now ruled the Seven Kingdoms from King's Landing. But his rule was distant, quiet, and heavily reliant on his council. Some called it wise, others weak. It wasn't long before discontent began to boil beneath the surface, especially in the Westerlands and the Reach. The lords whispered. Rebellions stirred, and in the chaos a name began to echo among the small folk and broken soldiers. Tormund Giantsbane, the free man, the warrior of the north, the one who never bowed to kings but fought like one. Jon Snow had disappeared beyond the wall, leaving Tormund to lead the free folk. But word reached him, strange rumors coming from beyond the south, that the lords of the realm were seeking a new ruler, one untainted by noble blood, one loved by the people. And many, bizarrely, saw Tormund as that man. Me? A king? Tormund had laughed so hard he nearly choked on his own ale. I drink goat's milk, piss off cliffs, and sleep on snow. What in the 7 bloody hells do I want with a golden chair? And silk sheets? But when the letters kept coming, scrolls from Dawn, the Riverlands, even the North, his laughter faded. These weren't jokes. These were invitations, calls for leadership. Ghost, the white direwolf, had returned from the wilds and now stood by his side. The old wolf watched him quietly, as if sensing something greater than either of them understood. After weeks of silence, Tormund finally spoke. If I take this path, there's no going back. He gathered a band of trusted wildlings, warriors and women alike, and rode south, not to conquer, but to meet, to see if the world of kings and crowns was truly mad enough to want a wild man on the throne. Winterfell had changed since Jon last ruled it. Sansa Stark was the Lady of the North, ruling with wisdom and caution. When Tormund arrived at the gates, the guards nearly shot arrows, thinking him a raider. It was Arya who stopped them. She had returned from her journeys, older, deadlier, but still herself. You stink of mammoth meat, she said with a smirk, but you haven't changed. Says the girl who once tried to stab me for fun. Tormund grinned. Sansa wasn't thrilled. You? She said sharply. They want you to rule the 7 kingdoms? I don't want it, Tormund replied, serious now, but maybe that's the point. The lords and ladies of Westeros were gathering in River Run for a new great council. The realm was tired of fragile kings, of endless wars, of children on thrones. They wanted strength, but also someone untouched by the Game of Thrones. Tormund's name had become a symbol, not of royalty, but of freedom. As he travelled south, Tormund encountered both mockery and admiration. Some nobles scoffed. A savage. In a bear cloak, they'd mutter, but the people, farmers, blacksmiths, orphans, gathered around him. He drank with them, listened to them, fought brigands with them. He didn't speak in riddles or hide behind courtiers. In Tormund, they saw something Westeros had never known, a ruler who didn't think himself better than them. As he neared River Run, banners flew high, and the council chamber waited. Inside were lords, ladies, maesters and knights, but this time no one was certain what would happen. Would they choose another noble with a fragile claim? Or would the realm dare something different? Tormund walked into the hall with his wildling companions, boots muddy, hair uncombed, wolf at his side, and his sword dragging behind him like a man who had never wanted anything from this world, except to be free. And now the 7 kingdoms would ask him to wear chains of gold and call them honor. The great council hall in River Run was soaked in tension. Banners from all corners of Westeros flapped lazily in the wind outside. But inside, the lords and ladies sat rigid, unsure how to react to the man who had just walked into their sacred chamber, dragging a great sword and chewing on dried meat. Tormund. Giantsbane looked around the hall with mild curiosity, as if he were examining the inside of a new cave. Is this where the talking happens? He asked loudly, his voice echoing off stone walls. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some lords rolled their eyes, others whispered nervously. Lord Edric Tarley, A stern man with a jaw like an anvil stood. "This is a council of the realm, not a barnyard. Show some respect, wildling," Tormund snorted. "You call me wildling like it's an insult. I'd rather be wild than chained to gold and lies." The silence that followed was thick. But then, unexpectedly, Lady Brienne of Tarth stood. "I fought beside this man," she said. "He's crude, yes, but brave, loyal, honest. And Westeros could use more of that." Sansa Stark nodded from her seat, though her expression remained guarded. "The North remembers, and the North remembers that Tormund fought with us when no one else would." A few murmurs of agreement stirred in the hall, but just as quickly opposition rose. "He's no lord," cried Lord Grafton of Gulltown. "He has no blood claim, no titles, no education." Tormund stepped forward. "You're right. I don't. Never wanted any of that. But maybe that's why the people like me. I don't pretend to be better than them. I drink, fight, and bleed like any of them. I don't rule by birth. I earn respect by action." There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable one, and then from the back of the hall, a slow clap echoed. It was Tyrion Lannister, older now, his hair silvering, but his smirk still sharp. "I never thought I'd say this," he said, stepping forward, "but I've heard worse speeches in this room. Tormund may not speak like a king, but kings who speak too well often lie even better. And I, for one, am tired of liars." Tormund turned to him. "You're the little man who drinks and thinks, right?" Tyrion bowed. "And you're the big man who drinks and forgets." The council burst into nervous laughter. Over the next few days, debate raged. Tormund remained in River Run, mostly drinking, training in the yard, and occasionally wandering. The city walls talking to beggars and children. He ignored most noble etiquette and refused to sit on the plush chair reserved for royal candidates. Instead, he built a fire pit in the middle of the courtyard and roasted meat with the locals. He didn't campaign, but his popularity grew. When the vote came, the room was tense. Edric Tarley voted against. So did Grafton and a dozen other nobles. But then came the surprises. Dorne voted yes. So did the Riverlands, the Vale, and even the Stormlands, whose young lady ruler claimed, "The realm needs a storm, not another shadow." Sansa Stark abstained, saying only, "The North is its own now. But if Westeros must have a king, let him be one who remembers how to bleed." In the end, it came down to the Reach. Their representative stood slowly. "We believe in tradition," he said, "but traditions have burned this realm for centuries. We choose it's something new." The chamber erupted, some in cheers, others in horror. But it was done. Tormund Giantsbane, son of no one, was named King of the Seven Kingdoms. When they brought him the crown, a new one forged from the remnants of the Iron Throne, he looked at it and laughed. "Keep it," he said. "I don't need it. If people follow me, it won't be because I wear metal on my head." "But your Grey Simmermeister," began. Tormund grabbed the crown and flung it into the fire pit. "Let the people see it burn," he said. "No more thrones, no more lies, just me, Tormund of the Free Folk. King, if you say so, but I'm not bowing to ghosts and gold." That night, Westeros lit bonfires across the land. Not to honor a noble lineage, but to celebrate the start of something strange, something wild. Tormund's first official decree as king was as unorthodox as the man himself. No more crowns, no more thrones. He sat cross-legged in the center of the old small council chamber, boots on the polished table, chewing on roasted rabbit as he addressed the stunned advisers who had served under 3 kings before him. "Why does everyone sit in these fancy chairs, pretending they don't fart like the rest of us?" he asked, kicking over a cushioned stool. "We'll meet by the fire, with meat." No one rules well when they're hungry. The maesters were horrified, the nobles were speechless, but the small folk who heard about it laughed until their sides hurt. The new king of the 7 kingdoms ruled not from the Iron Throne, now reduced to melted slag in the courtyard, but from a carved log by a campfire built in the ruined red. Keep's garden. He refused guards inside his halls. He insisted people speak plainly without bows or titles. To many it was madness. To others it was a breath of fresh air. Tormund chose his advisers in the most unconventional way, not by blood, but by challenge. Anyone who wanted a seat at his table had to answer 3 questions, asked in front of an open crowd. What do you fear most? What would you give up to protect the people? What lie have you told that shames you? It wasn't wisdom he tested, but honesty. Tyrion Lannister returned as Hand of the King, mostly because, as he put it, no one else is stupid enough to try and keep this place from exploding under a wildling king. Arya Stark visited briefly, refusing any official title, but Tormund offered her a permanent seat if she ever got bored of sailing west. She just laughed and kissed him on the cheek. If you ever go mad, I'll be the first to put a knife through your ribs. Brienne of Tarth was made Shield of the People, a new role created by Tormund to replace the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. You're the only one I trust to stop me if I ever lose my way, he said. And perhaps most shockingly, Tormund gave a seat to a former beggar, a one-eyed woman named Marla, who had lived in Flea Bottom her entire life. She had no noble blood, but when asked what she feared most, she said, going hungry again. When asked what she would give up, she said, anything I've got. When asked what lie shamed her, she said, that I used to pretend I didn't have a daughter, so she'd get food before I did. Tormund wept. You speak like a true queen, he told her. Of course, not everyone was pleased. The Westerlands, still ruled by a proud and bitter lord, refused to pay tribute. Why should we serve a man who calls himself king, but wears no crown? He snarled in his keep at Casterly Rock. Tormund's response was swift and unexpected. He didn't send armies. He went himself, riding a shaggy northern horse with Ghost by his side and a dozen wildlings in tow. No banners, no horns. When he reached Casterly Rock, the guards were too confused to attack. Let me in, Tormund said. Let's talk. What followed was a night of ale, arm wrestling, and stories of war. By morning, the Lord had agreed to pay taxes again, not because he had been threatened, but because he had been seen. No one's ever treated me like a man before, the Lord admitted. Only a title. Word spread fast. The king with no crown, no throne, and no royal blood was walking the roads of Westeros, drinking with the poor, hunting with farmers, wrestling with sellswords. He pardoned thieves who stole for their families. He punished corrupt knights who abused power. Once he even rode out to face a dragon, Drogon, the last living one, spotted in the skies above dawn. The realm panicked. But when Tormund reached the dunes where the beast had landed, he simply looked at the great creature and said, "You don't bow to anyone, do you?" Drogon sniffed him and flew away. "That makes two of us," Tormund laughed. But peace never lasted in Westeros. Even as Tormund walked freely among his people, others plotted in secret halls, old houses, long quiet, whispered again of restoration, of nobility, of order. "He's not one of us," they said. "He mocks everything we've built. He'll tear the old world down." And they were right, because Tormund didn't want to rule like them. He wanted to end the idea of ruling altogether, and that made him dangerous. Though Tormund ruled without a crown, the weight of leadership was no lighter. The kingdoms buzzed with tales of the Wild King, a ruler who hunted with shepherds and drank from wooden mugs instead of golden goblets. Children played games pretending to be Tormund, waving sticks like swords and shouting, "I don't want your bloody throne." But deep in the keeps of Westeros, not all were laughing. In a stone hall near Old Town, a shadowy group of lords and ladies met beneath flickering torchlight. There were no banners, only veiled identities and whispered names. They called themselves the Circle of Stone, and they had one goal: remove Tormund and restore the noble order. "He's unraveling everything," hissed Lord Redwyne. "A commoner advising the king, a wildling sleeping in the gardens of the Red Keep. What's next? Goats. On the small council?" "He's dangerous," said Lady Sunglass, a proud matron of the Reach. "Not because he's evil, but because he doesn't believe in the things that make us noble. He doesn't believe in us." The others nodded grimly. The old world was dying, and Tormund was hammering in the final nails. They would not let it die quietly. Tormund, oblivious to the plotting, was in the market square of King's Landing, wrestling with a butcher who claimed to have the best boar meat in the city. A crowd had gathered, cheering and laughing as the two men rolled in the mud. Suddenly an arrow flew through the air, fast, silent, aimed for the king's heart. But Ghost was faster. The direwolf leapt, jaws wide, intercepting the assassin mid-leap. The man hit the ground hard, his neck between Ghost's teeth before he could scream. The crowd scattered in panic, but Tormund remained still, staring down at the man. He bent, pulled the assassin's mask off, and spat. "Cowards," he muttered. "They won't even face me like warriors." Tyrion arrived moments later, breathless. "The Lords of the Reach are behind it," he said. "We intercepted messages. There's a plot." Tormund didn't roar with rage. He didn't call for Shawar. He simply nodded. "Then let's visit them." Within days, Tormund rode south, not with an army, but with a procession of free folk, wildlings, farmers, meisters, and even children. Not to threaten, but to show them who he was fighting for. They arrived in Highgarden, the proud jewel of the Reach, where vines climbed over stone walls and flowers masked the rot beneath noble smiles. The Circle of Stone expected a siege. Instead, Tormund called for a feast. He roasted goat and boar over open flames, passed ale to everyone, highborn and low, and spoke before thousands beneath the twilight sky. "You think I'm your enemy because I don't wear rings on my fingers and—" "Sit on velvet," he bellowed. "But the truth is I fight for you too. You've been lied to by your own houses for centuries, your taxes, your sons sent to die, your daughters married like cattle. That's not honor. That's theft in silk." The crowd was silent. Then an old woman stepped forward. "My son died in the war for the throne. They promised me land. I got a grave." Another man. "My brother was hanged for stealing grain during winter." Tormund looked at the noble lords watching from Highgarden's balconies. "You fear me not because I'm wild, but because I'm free." That night, several members of the Circle of Stone tried to flee. One was caught by villagers and dragged before the fire pit. Tormund looked at him, then at the crowd. "What does justice look like?" Some shouted, "Hang him!" Others demanded mercy. Tormund shook his head. "No more kings who kill from thrones. Let the people choose." A vote was held in public by raised hands. The traitor was banished, not executed. Tormund smiled. "You see, we don't need thrones to decide right from wrong. New seeds. Old soil after Highgarden." Tormund returned to King's Landing to a hero's welcome. But trouble stirred beneath the cobblestones. The Circle of Stone wasn't dead. It had gone deeper underground. Whispers turned to bribes. Scribes were paid to rewrite stories. Meisters debated his legitimacy in shadowed libraries, and far across the sea, a ship docked in Volantis. A young man disembarked, cloaked in shadow. He had black hair, piercing blue eyes, and a locket bearing a dragon's sigil, the last known Targaryen. Westeros might have accepted a wildling king, but would it survive a dragon's return? The sea mists rolled thick and cold across the docks of King's Landing. Fishermen whispered of a strange ship that had appeared without warning. No banners, no heralds, no sound of oars. Just a quiet vessel with black sails, trimmed in red, and a single figure stepping onto the wharf. He moved like a soldier but dressed like a ghost, cloaked in leather, silver clasps at his throat, eyes sharp as winter steel. He called himself Elric Storm, a bastard from Essos, but the coin he paid with bore the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen. Within days, whispers spread like wildfire. The last Targaryen lives. Some said he was a son of Daenerys, hidden away in Volantis. Others claimed he was the child of Rhaegar himself, smuggled across the sea during Robert's rebellion. No one could confirm it, but in Westeros, rumor is a weapon more powerful than steel. The Circle of Stone, humiliated and scattered after the failed assassination, began to reorganize. Now they had a name to rally behind. "Elric," said Lady Sunglass, "is our fire against the frost." In secret gatherings, they spoke of dragons returning, of bloodline restoration, of burning the Wild King out of his campfire kingdom. At the Red Keep, now overrun with children playing, chickens roaming the courtyards, and Tormund's pet goat, chewing royal banners, Tyrion delivered the news. "There's a Targaryen in the capital," he said, setting down a scroll, "or someone pretending to be one. Either way, the people are already curious." Tormund snorted, pulling a bone from his teeth. "Let him come. If he's got fire in him, we'll see what it's good for. I've seen fire melt worse things." Tyrion's eyes narrowed. "Westeros remembers dragons, Tormund. Fire can warm a hearth, or burn a city." Tormund stood and walked to the balcony, overlooking the city. Then maybe it's time I meet this dragon and see what he's made of. They met in the garden. Tormund had refused to bring guards. Aelric arrived with a single Essosi knight in red armor who never spoke. The two men stood across from each other, one wild and bearded in a fur-lined cloak, the other sleek, clean, eyes sharp like a Valyrian dagger. "You've stirred the pot," Tormund said casually. "Big words floating around your name. Targaryen, dragon, blood of old kings." Aelric smiled coolly. "And you, wildling, have claimed a kingdom without shedding a drop of noble blood. That makes you dangerous." Tormund laughed. "So you're here to kill me? Take the crown I never wanted?" "No," Aelric said. "I'm here to see if you deserve to keep what you were given. You're no king." "You think blood makes a king?" Tormund asked, stepping closer. "I've buried better men than you in snow deeper than your lies." There was a pause. Then, unexpectedly, Aelric offered a hand. "Perhaps we're not enemies," he said. "Not yet." Tormund took the hand, but his eyes were hard. "Not yet," he agreed. Fire beneath the stones. The uneasy peace lasted a week. Then 3 villages near Harrenhal were burned to ash. Witnesses spoke of flames that rained from the sky. Charred symbols were carved into the ground. A 3-headed dragon surrounded by chains. Tormund was furious. "If it's him, he'll answer for it," he growled. "If it's not, someone wants us at war." Brienne led a party to investigate. What they found wasn't dragon fire. It was alchemical fire, old stores from the Mad King's reign, stolen and used to mimic the destruction of a dragon. Tyrion paled. "Someone wants to start another dance of dragons." Tormund stood. Then, "We dance on their bones before they light the music." Westeros began to split. The nobility who still clung to tradition and bloodlines began to pledge themselves to Aelric, whether or not he was truly a Targaryen. To them, he was a symbol: fire, royalty, strength. The small folk, the free men, the women who had buried sons in noble wars, they still stood behind Tormund. Aelric never declared open war, but his men moved like shadows. Sabotage, assassination, propaganda. He didn't want a crown yet. He wanted Westeros to doubt the man who wore none, and slowly it began to work. Tormund's small council, once a circle of unity, began to fracture. Marla, the former beggar-turned-advisor, warned, "The people love you, but fear spreads faster than love. If they think you can't protect them from fire, they'll beg for a king who can." Tyrion, exhausted and pale, added, "Aelric plays the long game. He's letting you be the savage in the story while he walks around speaking High Valyrian and quoting old poems." Tormund growled. "So what? I start dressing in gold and pretending I care about old gods and dead kings?" "No," Brienne said softly. "You remind them who you are and why you lead." Tormund made a decision. He would go north, back, beyond the wall, not to retreat but to bring something forgotten back with him. "I need to remember who I am," he said, saddling his horse. "Not who they say I should be." Arya appeared before him as he prepared to leave. "You're not done here," she said. "I'll be back," Tormund replied, "but if I'm going to fight fire, I'll need more than truth and ale." Somewhere, beyond the wall, something ancient stirred in the frost. Not dragon, not man. Something wilder. Snow lashed against Tormund's face as he crossed beyond the wall, wind screaming like ghosts over the frost-covered stones. Ghost padded silently beside him, the direwolf's white fur nearly indistinguishable from the drifts. Behind them rode a small company of free folk, hunters, warriors, and shamans, who had followed Tormund not as subjects, but as kin. They rode, not to flee the growing war, but to find answers older than thrones, older even than dragons. "I need more than fire to fight fire," Tormund had said. What he truly needed was the truth of the land, the power of the north that had been buried beneath centuries of war kings and forgotten names. Their journey took them deep into the haunted forest, far past the last known maps of the Meisters. Days turned into weeks. Tracks of direwolves, mammoths, and stranger beasts marked the trails. Some nights, the stars vanished. Behind green glowing skies, they found it near the base of a jagged mountain, the Cave of Bones, a sacred place known only in whispers. Long ago, the children of the forest had hidden there, and some said the first greenseers had shed their skin within those cold stone halls. Tormund entered first. The walls were carved with swirling glyphs, trees, wolves, spirals, flames. In the center stood a withered weirwood stump, dead but humming with something ancient. An old woman sat beside it, skin pale as milk, eyes clouded white. "You come to remember," she said before Tormund spoke a word. "How do you know me? I knew the one who walked with ice. I knew the one who burned with fire. Now I meet the one who carries both." Tormund sat, placing his palm against the weirwood stump. Pain shot through his arm, then light, green and red, snow and blood, voices screaming and singing. He saw Jon Snow kneeling in the snow, then rising with flame in his hand. He saw Elric, with dragon wings of shadow, cities burning behind him. He saw his own reflection, a crown of antlers and bone, not gold. And behind it all, a massive heart tree bleeding black sap into the earth. When he awoke, the old woman was still beside him. "You are not just king," she whispered. "You are the breaker, the one who ends what never should have begun." Tormund's eyes burned. "Then I need more than visions." She handed him a small leather pouch. "Seeds of truth," she said. "Plant them where lies grow thickest." Meanwhile, in King's Landing, Elric moved like a rising tide. He hadn't yet claimed the throne, but he didn't need to. Nobles came to him daily, offering gold, land, soldiers. The circle of stone had become a blade in his hand. He set up his court in Dragonpit, declaring it a place reborn, and renamed himself Elric Targaryen, son of flame. The people still remembered the Mad King. They feared dragons, but they also feared war, famine, and foreign invasions. Elric promised order. "Bow to me," he told them, "and I will restore greatness. Resist, and you will burn." When Tormund returned, he did not march in as a conqueror. He walked. From the north to the Vale to the Reach and Riverlands, he walked on foot, speaking with people, planting the seeds of truth in gardens, courtyards, even castle grounds. At first, no one understood. But within days, strange trees began to grow, weirwoods with thorns, red sap that glowed in moonlight. Where the trees grew, people dreamed of voices whispering old truths. Secrets buried by nobles surfaced. Tax fraud, betrayals, abuse, hidden war crimes. The land was speaking, and the people were listening. A farmer in the Riverlands stood up to his lord. A young maester refused to rewrite history for coin. An entire village in the Vale threw down their banners and painted a weirwood on their gate. The battle lines were no longer drawn with swords, but with loyalty and meaning. Elric's banner, three-headed dragon, red on black. Tormund's sign, a twisted weirwood root wrapped around a broken crown. The cities divided. Some called Tormund the Root King. Others called Elric the True Flame. But the war was coming, and neither side could stop it now. At night, Brienne of Tarth stood watch atop the Red Keep's ruins, watching flickering torches of Elric's growing army camped near the dragon pit. Tormund joined her. "You should go," he said. "You're too noble for this mud." Brienne shook her head. "You're the only king who ever asked me to think, not kneel." They stood in silence, wind rustling broken banners. Then she handed him a sword, Oathkeeper, reforged from Valyrian. "Steel. You'll need this," she said. "Not for the war, but for what comes after." The next morning, a raven arrived bearing 2 words. "He marches." Elric was coming with 10,000 men and 2 black dragons, born of secret hatching in the smoking sea. And Tormund, with his broken army of free folk, farmers, wolves, and trees that whispered in dreams, would have to stand against him. Not just to save the realm, but to decide what kind of world would come next. The ground trembled as Elric Targaryen marched on King's Landing with 10,000 soldiers and 2 dragons overhead. Black wings cast massive shadows across the fields, their shrieks shaking windows and hearts alike. The city, barely recovering from its years of war, fell into fear once more. Some tried to flee. Others locked their doors and prayed to gods old and new. The nobles who had pledged to Tormund now sent secret ravens to Elric, begging pardon. But in the crumbling ruins of the Red Keep, Tormund Giantsbane stood unmoved. sharpening his axe beside a weirwood tree that had grown through the courtyard stones. Its red eyes bled sap that hissed in the firelight. "He's not just coming for the city," said Tyrion beside him, grim-faced. "He's coming to burn." "Your story from the bones of this place," Tormund spat. "Let him come, I've faced worse than dragons." Ghost growled low beside him, and even the direwolf seemed to sense it. This would not be a battle of armies alone. They gathered in the open, under grey skies. There was no war room, no painted table, just Tormund, his allies, and a circle of mismatched souls. Brienne of Tarth, her armor newly blackened and scratched. Marla, the one-eyed woman, now surrounded by a growing number of freedfolk and ex-serfs who called her Truth Speaker. Tyrion, scribbling last thoughts onto scrolls. No one may ever read. Arya, who had returned from the sea without a word, her eyes colder than the north. "We don't win by numbers," Brienne said. "We don't win by dragons," Tyrion added. "He has two. We have none." "We win," Arya said, "by reminding the world what it should never forget." Tormund stood, eyes hard. "We don't fight for gold or glory. We fight for the farmer with no field, for the girl who says no and gets chained anyway, for every bastard who ever wondered if he mattered." He grinned. "And if we die loud." The battle of roots and flame at dawn, the dragons descended, one black as coal, Vezra wreathed in emerald fire, the other with wings of crimson and silver, Nyrax screaming death into the sky. Elric rode between them, gleaming in Valyrian armor, his sword a burning streak in his hand. He looked like a hero of legend, and perhaps that was the point, but legends lie. Tormund met him on the broken steps of the Red Keep, axe in hand, wolf at his side, no crown, no armor. "I offer you one last chance," Elric said. "Bend the knee, let me fix this broken world." Tormund laughed so hard he nearly dropped his axe. "You think you're the fire that will forge peace, but all I see is another candle that'll melt the same old lies." And then they fought. Elric moved like lightning, trained by Associ swordmasters, fire dancing with each strike. Tormund fought like a storm, heavy, brutal, unrelenting. Every clash echoed like thunder across the city. Above, the dragons wheeled, spitting flame onto Tormund's defenders. But something strange was happening. Where the weirwood trees had grown, the flames bent away, curling, retreating. The old magic of the north, awakened by Tormund's journey, was fighting back. From the gardens, thorned roots erupted, dragging siege towers into the earth. Crows blackened the skies, answering the call of the old gods. The people of the city, forgotten for generations, now stood in the streets with pitchforks, clubs, stones, and faces painted with weirwood sap. They didn't fight for a king. They fought for a world that belonged to them again. Tormund, bloodied and roaring, drove Elric back toward the heart of the city, the remains of the Iron Throne, now a twisted pile of melted steel and scorched stone. "You wanted this," Tormund shouted, smashing his axe into the ground. "Here it is!" Elric raised his flaming sword. "I am the last dragon." "And I'm the last man standing," Tormund growled, and drove the axe through Elric's sword arm, sending it flying. Before the killing blow could fall, the black dragon Vezra screamed overhead, landing between them. It opened its jaws. Fire. Building, glowing. But it never released it. Ghost stepped forward, eyes locked with the beast's, and from the rubble the weirwood sap rose like mist. The old magic, roots, bone, blood, seeped through the streets. The dragon paused, then turned, and flew away. The battle was over by nightfall. Elric was taken, not killed. Tormund refused to execute him. "Let him see what a real kingdom looks like," he said. "One where no one needs to kneel." The dragons, it seemed, were gone, perhaps drawn to some distant mountain, or perhaps to something older than either man who tried to rule them. Tormund walked the streets, not in victory, but in silence. He found a broken mirror in an abandoned shop, stared into it. He looked like a king, but only because he never wanted to be one. The realm waited. Would Tormund now rebuild the throne, take the crown, create a new dynasty? He called the people to the square. Farmers, lords, sellswords, maids, bakers, smiths. Thousands stood. He held out a crown, one made of twisted iron and weirwood roots. "I could wear this," he said. and it would all begin again. Then he dropped it into the fire. Or we could choose something better. The crown burned, slowly in the fire, roots curling into ash, iron groaning like it remembered every lie ever told in its name. Tormund stood in the smoke, broad-shouldered and still, as silence swept over the city square. Thousands watched, mouths open, breaths held, as the only king they'd ever loved chose to be something else. "No more kings," he said, voice raw. "No more lords who forget your names. No more thrones that break your bones." He stepped away from the fire and raised his voice again. "From now on you rule yourselves." What came after wasn't perfect, it wasn't clean, but it was honest. Instead of one king in a capital, each region elected its own leader, not through blood, but voice. The Reach chose a healer, the Riverlands chose a farmer, Dawn chose a former, Spear Maiden turned scholar. The Westerlands surprised everyone by choosing a smith's daughter, who had stopped a noble from beating a child. The regions met every season in a council, not to scheme or declare war, but to share food, stories, and trade, and in the middle of it all, standing without a crown or even a title, was Tormund. Not king, not lord. Just Tormund Giantsbane, Tyrion Lannister, old and weary but sharper than ever, stayed in King's Landing to rebuild the libraries and the laws. "I was born in a house that thought gold was the only god," he once said. "Now I serve a realm that prays to none, and somehow I've never believed in it more." He taught young scribes to write not in the style of Meisters, but in the voice of the people. He preserved the truth of Tormund's rule, not polished, not perfect, but real. And when he died, a bench was carved in the city square beneath a weirwood tree with 3 words on the back. He thought honestly. Harrier Stark left again after the war, sailing west with her crew, but she returned 5 years later, her hair streaked with silver, a scar across her cheek. She never spoke of what she saw, but she walked straight to Tormund's camp in the mountains and said, "The world's still bigger than we know, but it's better now. You gave it that." They sat for hours, drinking in silence, laughing without reason. When she left again, she whispered, "If the world forgets you, I'll remind them." Tormund never returned to the Red Keep. Instead, he built a small cabin in the northern mountains. Wood, stone, nothing grand. Ghost stayed at his side, older now, slower, but still white as the snows that never melted. Around the cabin, the trees grew strange, half weirwood, half oak, with bark like old skin and leaves that whispered in windless nights. People called it the Truth Grove. Some came to visit seeking advice. Others brought offerings, not gold but poems, seeds, stories, songs. He listened to all, answered few, and always asked one thing before they left. "Are you free?" Elric's fate, Elric Targaryen, or whatever his true name had been, lived. Out his days tending gardens in a quiet monastery by the sea. He was never executed, never tortured. He was just left behind, forgotten by the world he tried to rule. One day he wrote a letter. No seal, no name. It read, "He won, because he never needed to." Years passed. Children were raised never knowing what a king was. Thrones were museum pieces. Lords became farmers. Knights became teachers. The weirwood trees, once feared, now stood in every town square. People would sit beneath them, not to pray but to remember. It became known as the Crownless Age, a time when power wasn't worn but shared, and though bards still sang of Aegon, of Robert, of Daenerys and Jon, it was the song of the wild man who broke the wheel that echoed in taverns and marketplaces. No sword nor scepter ruled his hand, no golden blood, no sacred land. He came with axe and roaring laugh, and left the world a better path. Tormund lived long, longer than anyone expected. White-bearded, scarred, loud to the very end. One night during the first snowfall of winter, he sat by a fire in his cabin with Brienne and Marla. They talked of the old days, dragons, fools, ghosts and kings. Then he looked to the stars and muttered, "I wonder if Jon's still out there, stubborn bastard." No one spoke for a while, then he laughed. "He probably hates that I made kinging look easy." Brienne raised a mug. "To the man who refused the throne." Marla raised hers. "To the man who broke it." Tormund raised his last. "To the people, may they never need saving again."